Welcome to Turbulence Tragedy, where we explore some of the most intense and dramatic stories from the world of aviation. I'm your host, Jesus Aviation, and today we're diving into one of the most shocking events in aviation history. The tragic downing of Korean Air Flight 007. On September 1st, 1983, what was supposed to be a routine flight from New York City to Seoul, sorry if I butchered that, ended in disaster, resulting in the loss of 269 lives and forever changing the course of international aviation and safety. This is a story about miscommunication, a Cold War crisis, and the consequences of a catastrophic error. So sit back as we retrace the fateful journey of Flight 007. September 1st, 1983. Korean Air Flight 007, a Boeing 747, takes off from JFK International Airport in New York City, bound for Seoul, South Korea. Again, sorry if I butcher Seoul. That's just how I pronounce it. The plane has a layover in Anchorage, Alaska, where it refuels after continuing its journey across the Pacific. On board are 269 people, passengers and crew, heading home or on business, unaware of the fate that awaits them. All seems normal as the plane reaches cruising altitude. However, somewhere over the northern Pacific, things start to go wrong. Flight 007 veers off its designated flight path and enters Soviet airspace. That was not a planned route, and the crew fails to realize the deviation. At the time, Soviet airspace was tightly controlled. Civilian aircraft straying into it considered a serious threat, especially given the tense geopolitical climate of the Cold War. Flight 007 wasn't a spy plane. It was a commercial flight. Lost, but not innocent. Yet that fact didn't matter. As the plane moves deeper into Soviet territory, the Soviet Union's air defense system detects the aircraft. Soviet fighter jets are scrambled, and they intercept the 747. They attempt to communicate with the plane, but due to a series of mistakes and confusion, the crew of Flight 007 doesn't hear the warning calls or understand the severity of the situation. The Soviets, believing the plane could be a reconnaissance aircraft. Sorry if I butchered that. I have not been able to talk recently. Take drastic action. Their military pilots don't hesitate. They fire missiles at the plane. In an instant, the plane is hit. The fuselage ruptures. The 747, with hundreds of lives aboard, begins to plummet. All 269 people on board perished. The world was left in shock. The wreckage was scattered over the Sea of Japan. No survivors were ever found. At first, the Soviet Union denied any involvement, claiming that the plane had been on a spy mission and had entered restricted airspace intentionally. They argued that it posed a national security threat. The world's reaction? Horror and disbelief. The U.S. government, led by President Ronald Reagan, condemned the attack, calling it a senseless act of terrorism. The incident was a major turning point in the Cold War relations. Not only had the innocent lives been lost, but the tragedy exposed how far tensions between superpowers had escalated. In the weeks that followed, the Soviet Union grudgingly acknowledged that they had shot down the plane, but insisted it had been a mistake. It was a response born out of fear and distrust. But that didn't bring the victims back, and it didn't undo the devastation. The downing of Flight 007 had lasting consequences. For one, it led to the increased international pressure of the Soviet Union to improve its communications with civilian airliners and to clarify airspace boundaries. It also resulted in new protocols to prevent military forces from misidentifying commercial flights. The tragedy also helped spark a global conversation about air safety. New technologies were developed, and aviation safety standards were enhanced to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. But despite the lessons learned, the emotional scars lingered. For the families and the victims, the pain of that day never truly faded. The event also raised uncomfortable questions about the power of the military action during times of the international tensions. Today, Korean Air Flight 007 is remembered not just as a tragic incident, but as a symbol of the dangers that come with misunderstanding, mistrust, and military overreaction. It's a painful reminder that the world is sometimes more fragile than we'd like to admit. So what can we take away from this? In aviation, safety is always paramount. But it's also crucial that we remember the human cost behind these tragedies, the families who lost loved ones, and the world that was left to pick up the pieces. Thank you for tuning in to Turbulence and Tragedies. Join us next time as we explore more stories from the skies, the triumphs, and the tragedies that have shaped aviation history. I'm Jay's Aviation. Until then, fly safe.